Okay, so we'll be going to our interview for today, and it is World No Tobacco Day once again, a day dedicated to looking at the health issues and complications that arise from tobacco intake and how to address them. And our guest on the show today is Seember Joy Ali, who is the country director, that's the country lead Nigeria Tobacco Control Data Initiative, that's TCDI Development Gateway. Seember, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much, Nicole. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right, my pleasure. Okay, so it's World No Tobacco Day once again, and every year this day is dedicated May 31st to talking about this day and creating awareness about the implications of tobacco intake. But interestingly, this year is focusing on children, and with the theme, protecting children from tobacco industry interference. So my question will be, what is the place of data in allowing government to do this role of protecting children who are kids from being lured into smoking by tobacco industry?
Thank you, Collier. That's a great question. And I really align with the theme for World No Tobacco Day this year, 2024, because the children are really the future, as we say. And Africa as a whole, especially Nigeria, has a very youthful population. And so it's important that we have tobacco control efforts in place that shield children from the predatory practices that we see in the way that tobacco is being marketed, right? So the role of government in ensuring that this happens is so important, because government is the custodian of what happens with not just generations right now, but planning ahead in terms of the future for the children who are coming. And so one way that government can do that, and by using data, is to have aggregated data to be able to make proper plans. If you, for example, want to make a pot of soup for 5 people, and you only, end up making soup that could feed 2 people because you didn't know that you were going to have 5 people, that automatically means that the 3 people who will come in extra might not get something to eat. And that is really what planning is about. You need to know how many people you're talking about and what kind of information you have that helps you know what kind of targeted interventions can be done for tobacco control, right? And so it's not just having the information, but having it in a disaggregated form. So for example, in Nigeria, we have a very youthful population, and lots of people are spread all over Nigeria. It's a huge country. And so the realities of a child or a youth that lives in Sokoto, for example, might not always be the same reality for a child who lives in, let's say, in the southern or western part of Nigeria, right? Because the demographic is really different, the realities, the context, the lifestyle, all of those things, culture put together means that if you're thinking about what kind of interventions you need to have for a child or a youth who you want to protect in the north, you need to think about the context. And so that will be different from somebody in the west. And having this kind of disaggregated data really helps the government to think through what kind of targeted interventions could be done to be able to better protect them. For example, when you think about children, for example, who are out of school versus children who are in school, for the government to be able to know what to do in terms of protecting children in that sense would also be different. And so data has a big role to play to assist policymakers to understand, number one, how to be able to reduce overall consumption of tobacco, right? But also just to protect these children really from the tactics that kind of undermine the global and national efforts that we have been putting in place together with the governments to be able to reduce clearly tobacco consumption in the country, especially with children involved.
Quite key and important, that the points you made about how important data is. But we do know that in Nigeria, data collection is a big issue. Sometimes you hear there is no correct data about any particular issue. But we do know that Development Gateway's Tobacco Control Data Initiative, which was established in 2019, is set out to do just this and also provide a database for government to use for this specific role. So tell us the specific process that it took to create this background information that is domiciled on that dashboard.
Again, thanks. And this is a great question. The program as a whole, the Tobacco Control Data Initiative, was set up for that exact reason. So we hear it multiple times that, there's no data, or even when the data is available, is siloed in different pots of places, and people are not able to see like a holistic view to understand at national or regional level what is really happening, right? And so TCDI was set up in 2019 to be able to provide a one-stop shop, really, as a platform where the government and policymakers and stakeholders as a whole can have access to vital information, relevant, contextual, homegrown data that allows us to be able to make clear decisions as far as tobacco control is concerned. And as a development gateway, our process is very transparent because we want to be able to make sure that we have data that speaks to the context of each country where we work in. And by doing that, we need to make sure that we're doing this code in a co-design way with our stakeholders. And what do I mean by co-design? So it's not just what we think or what we assume to be the issues that we will be thinking through, but we bring in all stakeholders. So civil society, government, relevant policymakers in all together to be able to understand really as a first process, like a scoping study really, like what are the issues? We do an assessment, we understand what is the tobacco control issues that are relevant in this country and what are those data gaps? How can we bridge those data gaps, right? And then once we have the assessment done, we then move on to what we call a validation workshop. And in this validation, we really take all our stakeholders through the steps of what we've learned in the assessment and how we allow them to be able to tell us whether that really reflects what the reality and the context is for Nigeria. And then we then move into the theme, choosing what those themes are. So in Nigeria, on the Tobacco Control Data Initiative dashboard, we have 6 themes. We have prevalence, we have tobacco taxation, we have shisha, we have industry interference, we have tobacco harm, and we have I believe tobacco. I've mentioned tobacco harm already. So these, and then illicit trade. So those 6 themes are the themes that were prioritized in Nigeria as the most important first steps of tobacco control work. And so we then move on to writing the actual write-up for what you would see on those pages. These write-ups are then reviewed by Nigerian, homegrown, African subject matter experts. So I've listed 6 themes, and we isolate who are the experts in Nigeria for those different themes. And they review every single line and step on these write-ups, which we then hand over to a technical team to develop like the icons, the infographics that are then attached to these write-ups. Again, we bring this back to stakeholders to validate, because at every step of the way, we want to make sure that we're doing exactly what stakeholders anticipate and expect. And so that we bring it back to them to validate. And then once that is validated, we then post it on the public platform, and then we have a proper launch, which is where we are at this point. We now have a dashboard at nigeriatobaccocontroldata.org to be able to access Nigeria's information going forward. And we do this because we want to make sure that it's reflective of what our stakeholders are looking for, and it's reflective of what the tobacco control realities in Nigeria are, and it's also reflective of what the data gaps are. And so it's very useful to our stakeholders in the different ways that we work. So for example, policymakers will need information to be able to make proper policies. We have civil society that needs information to be able to do more of their activism. And then maybe we have researchers and academicians who need to be able to push the research, and also for students and all of those. So in the different ways, we have all these relevant bodies together helping us validate all and put onto this dashboard. Of course, we are being funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to do this work. And the first 6 countries are the initial target countries, but we're hoping that as we continue on in our interventions, that we will add more countries, and that will form like the next tier of work. But at this point, we're focusing on the initial 6. And the reason is because there is a lot of work that is still being done in these countries with different things, realities and contexts moving on. And so we need to make sure that our efforts are consolidated in the first place before we begin to kind of like push it on to the other tier 2 countries.
So are you getting any feedback already? And if you are getting, what would this feedback be in terms of using it for policy issues and interventions in the countries where you operate?
Oh yeah, the feedback has been wonderful. And it really comes back to the point of having homegrown, reliable, verifiable data. As I explained in the way that we work, this is information that is owned by each country. This is information that is designed by each country. And this is information that is verified and trusted really by each country. And it's different because we, for the longest time, will have to rely on information that is coming from the West or information that is coming from other parts of the world that don't really have the context of Nigeria or the other African countries, really. So having homegrown data that really reflects the Nigerian context and as well as the other country context is very important, because you like we say colloquially, nobody knows you more than you know yourself, right? So you can't rely on data that is coming from parts of the world that their context is completely different from data that is coming from your home right now, where the people who are working on that data understand the context and know what it is being the issues are. But beyond that, there's also the angle of just being able to debunk, the industry narratives and the lies and the myths that the tobacco industry pushes out. Having verifiable data helps you to be able to debunk the lies and those narratives that are harmful, and just in general be able to expose the tactics that they employ to be able to manipulate the populace. When you have real data and you have verifiable data, it's easy for you to debunk and expose those myths more clearly. And generally, in line with the theme of today's World No Tobacco Day as well, verifiable data allows the government to be able to provide and protect the young people in the society, because it gives them the knowledge and the way to be able to equip themselves with the tools that they need to be able to, kind of like rebuff the manipulation and generally just empower young people to be able to know what is the information that they need to have to be able to reject what the industry tactics usually come and the format of which it comes. So it's been great. And overall, stakeholders have found it very helpful, and we're really happy that we are at this point in this.
Okay, we're going to let you go, but not before asking you, because I saw you and the presentations you made when you attended the Renewable Development Initiative program, and you were a presenter there. So you talked to journalists really about how to use data. So how important do you think, or how well do you think journalists can delve into this crusade of data in helping the country when it comes to tobacco control?
I think that the place of journalism in tobacco control cannot be overemphasized. Journalists are really the custodians and the propagators of truth or untruth, depending on what side they fall in the society. And so they hold a really important place because they shape the narrative, they shape the knowledge, they shape opinions, they shape the influence, not just of policymakers, but also of individuals. Right? So the onus is on them and on us really to be able to make sure that we get them to a point where they know where to go for real verifiable data. And this is I don't take this for granted, because I understand that the media could either make or mar tobacco control efforts. And so we need to make sure that they're at a place where information is at their fingertips, and to just generally emphasize the importance of modern journalism to tobacco control reporting. There is no way we can win the war on tobacco control without the proper use and the proper use and collaboration and partnership of the media, because we need them to be able to humanize the data, to put a face to the data. What does it mean when you say something like 3.2 million people die of tobacco? What does that mean? We hear that a lot, but journalists can take that number and put a face to it, so they're able to show you real cases of what the tobacco rot looks like. And that is where we need to move to. I think that the journalists hold a really important place, and we look forward to continuing to work with them more and more to get to a point where tobacco reporting is done well.
All right, it's really been nice talking to you on this issue. Seember Joy Ali, Country Lead Nigeria Tobacco Control Data Initiative Development Gateway. It's a pleasure to have you share this views on this issue. Do have a great day. And for the great work you're
Thank you
doing
so
on
much.
data collection, go ahead and do it. Nigerian journalists will key into that, I can assure you.
Thank you so much. Really happy to be here, and we'll have a great rest of the day.
All right then. Okay, so that has been it on the interview segment of Environment Today.